I thought I was going crazy when I found that letter. 3 weeks ago, cleaning out my grandmother's attic after her funeral, I discovered something that made my hands shake so violently I nearly dropped the yellowed envelope. My entire life, everything I believed about who I was, where I came from, why my parents always seemed to hold something back when they looked at me, it was all built on the most devastating lie imaginable. The letter was addressed to my grandmother from someone named Margaret. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Mrs. Patterson, I know what we agreed 34 years ago, but Jake deserves to know the truth. Richard's affair with me didn't just produce a child. It destroyed 2 families. Your son David raised Jake believing he was doing something noble, but we both know the real reason. Please, before I die, let me tell him who his real father is. My name is Jake. I'm 34 years old, and apparently, my entire existence is the product of my uncle's affair with my biological mother, covered up by the family I've called my own for 3 decades. Standing in that dusty attic, surrounded by boxes of Christmas decorations and old photo albums, I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, crack, like ice on a frozen lake right before it gives way completely. The woman who gave birth to me wasn't some anonymous teenager who couldn't care for a baby. She was Margaret Margaret Williams. She was my Uncle Richard's secret lover, and I was the living, breathing evidence of their betrayal. My adoptive parents, David and Susan Patterson, had told me the same story for 34 years. A young mother, unable to provide, made the brave choice to give me a better life. They painted it as a beautiful sacrifice, a gift wrapped in love and selflessness. Every birthday, every holiday, every time I felt different or disconnected, they'd remind me how chosen I was, how special my story was. What they never mentioned was that my biological father was David's own brother. What they never said was that Richard had been married to my Aunt Carol for 15 years when I was conceived. What they conveniently left out was that taking me in wasn't an act of charity. It was damage control. I sat on my grandmother's old rocking chair, reading that letter over and over until the words blurred together. Margaret had tried to reach out multiple times over the years, but somehow those letters never made it to me. My grandmother, bless her soul, had been intercepting them, probably thinking she was protecting everyone. But Margaret was persistent. In her final letter, dated just 6 months ago, she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Jake has a half-sister. Richard and I had another child 2 years after Jake was born. Her name is Emma, and she's been asking questions about her older brother her entire life. Richard told her Jake died as an infant. I can't take this secret to my grave. A half-sister. Somewhere out there, I had a half-sister who thought I was dead. The reunion was scheduled for this weekend. The annual Patterson family gathering at Uncle Richard and Aunt Carol's lake house in Vermont. 3 days of forced family fun, awkward conversations, and the same old dynamics that had made me feel like an outsider my entire life. But this year was going to be different. This year I was going armed with the truth. I'd spent the last 3 weeks doing research. Found Margaret's obituary from 4 months ago. Found Emma Williams on social media. And my God, the resemblance was uncanny. Same dark hair, same stubborn chin, same slightly crooked smile. She lived in Portland, worked as a pediatric nurse, had 2 kids of her own. Her Facebook was full of family photos, but I noticed something. No pictures of her father. No Father's Day posts. No mentions of Richard Williams at all. The drive to Vermont felt like riding toward my own execution. My wife Sarah sat in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing at me with that worried expression she'd been wearing for weeks. I told her everything, shown her the letters, walked her through my research. She'd held me while I cried. Actually cried. For the first time in years. Cried for the mother I never got to know. For the sister who thought I was dead. For the family that had lied to me with such practiced ease. "You don't have to do this," Sarah said as we pulled into the long driveway lined with pine trees. "We can turn around right now. But I did have to do this. Some secrets are too big to carry alone. And this one had been suffocating me for 3 weeks. The lake house looked exactly the same as it had every summer for the past 2 decades. Same wraparound porch, same red Adirondack chairs, Same dock stretching out into water so clear you could see the rocky bottom 20 feet down. Uncle Richard was already out there on his boat, probably trying to catch something impressive to brag about at dinner. Aunt Carol was in the kitchen. I could see her through the window, bustling around with the manic energy she always brought to family gatherings. My parents' car was already there. David and Susan had arrived early, as they always did, to help with preparations. More likely, they came early to gossip and position themselves as the helpful, responsible siblings. They'd been playing that game for years, and I'd always been their unwitting prop. The grateful adopted son who proved their goodness, their generosity, their moral superiority. Walking up those porch steps felt surreal, like stepping into a movie where I knew the script was about to change dramatically, but no one else had been given the new pages. "Jake!" My mom rushed out to hug me, that familiar cloud of lavender perfume and hairspray enveloping me. "We were wondering when you'd get here. Traffic wasn't too bad, was it?" "Not too bad," I managed, accepting her embrace while feeling like my skin was crawling. How do you hug someone who's been lying to you your entire life? How do you smile and make small talk when every word feels like swallowing glass? Dad appeared in the doorway, beer in hand, that easy grin that had always made me feel welcome. "There he is. Come on in." Rich just got back with a string of bass that'll make you weep with jealousy. The first few hours were agony. Sitting around the kitchen table, listening to the same old stories, the same old jokes, the same family dynamics playing out like a worn-out record. Aunt Carol fussing over everyone, Uncle Richard holding court with his fishing tales, my parents playing their parts as the stable, responsible ones. And me, sitting there with this nuclear bomb of information, watching them all perform their roles in the grand deception. But I was watching differently now, noticing things I'd never seen before. The way Uncle Richard avoided direct eye contact with me. The way my parents seemed unusually attentive, almost nervous. The way Aunt Carol kept glancing between Richard and me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Around dinner time, Richard's phone rang. He glanced at it, and his face went completely white. "I need to take this," he mumbled, stepping out onto the porch. Through the screen door, we could hear bits of the conversation. A woman's voice, young, upset. Richard's responses were tense, clipped. "Emma, I told you, not now. We discussed this." Emma. My half-sister Emma. When he came back inside, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Everything okay?" Aunt Carol asked. "Fine," he said, but his hands were shaking as he reached for his beer. That's when I decided I couldn't wait until tomorrow. I couldn't sit through another night of lies and pretense. "So," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm even to my own ears, "who wants to tell me about Margaret Williams?" The silence that followed was deafening. Not just quiet, dead silent. The kind of silence that feels like a held breath, like the moment before a thunderclap. Uncle Richard dropped his beer bottle. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered, sending foam and glass across the room. My mother's face went ashen. Dad's jaw tightened in that way it always did when he was about to lose his temper, but he couldn't figure out at whom. Aunt Carol just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "What did you say?" Mom whispered. I pulled the letter from my jacket pocket, unfolded it slowly, deliberately. I said, "Who wants to tell me about Margaret Williams? My biological mother. The woman who had an affair with Uncle Richard. The woman who gave birth to me and my half-sister Emma." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Richard was backing toward the door, shaking his head. "Jake, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I stood up, and for the first time in my life I felt taller than everyone in that room. "I understand that my entire life has been built on a lie. I understand that you've all been playing parts in some elaborate cover-up for 34 years. What I don't understand is why." "Sit down," Dad said, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he'd used when I was a kid. "Let's talk about this like adults." "Adults?" I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to me. "Adults tell the truth, Dad. Adults don't spend 3 decades lying to someone about who they are." Mom was crying now, those careful tears that wouldn't smudge her makeup. We were protecting you. From what? From knowing I had a sister? From knowing my biological mother tried to contact me for years? From knowing that you intercepted her letters and kept us apart? We didn't know about the letters, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Grandma knew. Grandma was collecting them, saving them. Did you really think she was going to take your secret to the grave? Uncle Richard finally found his voice. Your grandmother promised. Your grandmother's dead, I shot back. And so is Margaret. So is my biological mother, who died 4 months ago without ever getting to meet her son. Without ever getting to explain why she gave me up. Without ever getting to tell Emma that her brother was alive. The room felt like it was spinning. All those years of feeling like I didn't quite fit, like something was missing, like there was some inside joke everyone else was in on. It all made sense now. Emma thinks I'm dead, I continued, my voice getting stronger with each word. My sister has been grieving a brother who was never dead, just hidden from her by a family too embarrassed to deal with the consequences of an affair. Aunt Carol spoke for the first time since my revelation. Her voice was small, broken. I knew about you, she said. I've always known. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I didn't notice when my husband suddenly became interested in helping his brother adopt a baby? She turned to Richard, and the look in her eyes could have melted steel. 34 years, Richard. 34 years I've watched you look at Jake and see your guilt staring back at you. 34 years I've pretended not to notice how much he looks like you. How much he looks like the daughter you never told me about. Carol, Richard started. Don't. She held up her hand. Just don't. I stayed. I kept your secret. I played the part of the loving aunt because that boy didn't deserve to pay for your mistakes. But don't you dare try to justify this now. The truth was spilling out like water through a broken dam. Years of careful construction crumbling in real time. There's more, I said, pulling out my phone. Emma's been looking for her family. She hired a private investigator 6 months ago. He found Margaret's connection to this family. He found adoption records. Emma knows about the Pattersons. She knows about me. I showed them the email I'd received that morning. From Emma Williams, addressed to Jake Patterson, with the subject line, "Are you my brother?" The email was short, direct. My name is Emma Williams. My mother was Margaret Williams. Before she died, she told me I had a brother named Jake who was adopted by the Patterson family in 1991. I don't know if you know about me, but I've been looking for you my entire life. If you're reading this, please know that I've never stopped hoping you were out there somewhere. I live in Portland now, but I'll be driving to Vermont this weekend. Mom left me an address, 47 Pine Lake Road. I'll be there Sunday morning. I hope you'll be there too. 47 Pine Lake Road. Uncle Richard's address. She's coming here, I said. Tomorrow morning. My sister is driving here to find her family. To find her father who told her I was dead. To find the brother she's been mourning for 32 years. The room erupted. Richard started pacing, running his hands through his hair. Carol was sobbing now, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her chest. My parents were arguing in those sharp, whispered tones that had terrified me as a child. But in the middle of all that chaos, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. The secret was out. The weight I'd been carrying for 3 weeks, the weight they'd all been carrying for decades. It was finally in the open. What are we going to do? Mom asked, looking around the room like someone might have an answer. We're going to tell the truth, I said. For once in 34 years, we're going to tell the truth. You don't understand the implications, Dad started. I understand that Emma is going to drive 8 hours to get here tomorrow morning. I understand that she's going to knock on that door expecting to find her father and meet her brother. I understand that we can either meet her with honesty or we can traumatize her with more lies. I looked directly at Uncle Richard. You have a daughter who has never stopped loving you despite everything. You have a daughter who's been waiting her entire life for her family to acknowledge her existence. Tomorrow morning, you get a chance to be the father she deserves, or you get to explain why you're not worth knowing. The night was brutal. Sarah and I stayed in the guest room. listening to raised voices from downstairs, doors slamming, cars starting and leaving and coming back. At one point, I heard Aunt Carol screaming at Richard in the driveway. Words I'd never heard her use, accusations that had been building for decades. By morning, an uneasy truce had settled over the house. Everyone was exhausted, red-eyed, moving carefully around each other like survivors of some natural disaster. At 10:30, a silver Honda pulled into the driveway. Emma Williams stepped out of that car, and it was like looking at a female version of myself. Same height, same build, same way of standing with one hip cocked when nervous. She was beautiful in that understated way some people have, like she'd never quite realized her own appeal. She stood by her car for a moment, looking up at the house, gathering courage. Then she walked up the porch steps and knocked. I opened the door. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Two strangers who shared blood, DNA, a biological mother neither of us had really known. "Jake," she said, and her voice was soft, hopeful. "Emma." And then she was hugging me, and I was hugging her back, and 34 years of separation just dissolved. She smelled like vanilla and coffee, and when she pulled back to look at me, her eyes were the same shade of brown as mine. "I can't believe you're real," she whispered. "I can't believe you thought I was dead." Behind me, the family was gathering. Richard appeared in the doorway, and Emma's face went through a dozen emotions in the space of a heartbeat. Joy, anger, confusion, hurt. "Hi, Dad," she said, and the word carried decades of weight. What followed was the most honest conversation the Patterson family had ever had. We sat around that same kitchen table where I detonated my truth bomb the night before, and for the first time in my life, I heard the real story. Richard and Margaret had been having an affair for 2 years. Carol knew, but stayed for reasons that were complicated and personal and not entirely my business. When Margaret got pregnant with me, the decision was made to hide the paternity. David and Susan, who had been trying to have children for years, agreed to adopt me. It wasn't charity. It was crisis management. When Margaret got pregnant again 2 years later, Richard panicked. He told Emma I had died, told Carol the affair was over, told Margaret she was on her own. Margaret raised Emma as a single mother, never speaking ill of Richard but never quite able to hide her sadness about the family that could have been. Emma had grown up knowing something was missing. She'd felt the absence of her father, the ghost of a brother she'd never met. When Margaret got sick, she'd finally told Emma the truth. All of it, including the adoption, the Pattersons, the lies that had kept us apart. "I've been so angry," Emma said, looking at Richard. "Not just at you, but at Mom, at myself, at the whole situation. But sitting here now, seeing Jake, I don't know if I can stay angry anymore." The apologies came slowly, carefully. Richard to Emma for abandoning her. Carol to Emma for knowing about her but never reaching out. My parents to me for the deception. Me to Emma for not knowing she existed. But the most surprising apology came from Emma to me. "I'm sorry you had to grow up feeling like something was missing," she said. "I'm sorry you had to carry that weight without knowing why." That afternoon, Emma and I walked down to the dock, sat side by side on the edge, feet dangling in the water, talking like we were trying to fit 34 years of conversation into a few hours. She told me about her kids, about her work, about the man she'd married who'd helped her search for her family. I told her about Sarah, about my job as a financial advisor, about the quiet life I'd built in New Hampshire. But mostly we talked about Margaret. Emma shared stories I'd never heard, showed me pictures on her phone. Our mother had been funny, stubborn, endlessly optimistic despite everything. She'd saved every article she could find about the Patterson family, following my life from a distance. She'd known about my college graduation, my wedding, my promotions at work. "She was so proud of you," Emma said. "She used to say that giving you up was the hardest thing she'd ever done, but watching you succeed from far away was the greatest gift she could have given herself." As the sun started to set over the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and orange, Emma turned to me with a serious expression. "What happens now?" she asked. It was a fair question. We'd had our emotional reunion, aired out 34 years of family secrets, but what came next? How do you build a relationship with someone who should have been part of your life from the beginning? I don't know, I said honestly, but I know I want to find out. Emma smiled, and it was like looking in a mirror. Good, because I was really hoping you'd say that. The drive home Sunday evening was quiet. Sarah held my hand across the center console, occasionally squeezing my fingers when she thought I needed the comfort. I did need it, but not for the reasons she probably thought. I wasn't sad about what I'd learned. I wasn't angry about the lies anymore. I was grieving, but not for the family I'd lost. For the time we'd all wasted. 34 years of secrets, of careful conversations, of relationships built on half-truths and strategic omissions. Emma and I had exchanged numbers, made plans to meet again in 2 weeks. She wanted to introduce me to her children, my niece and nephew. I wanted her to meet Sarah properly, to see the life I'd built despite not knowing where I came from. But more than that, we both wanted to visit Margaret's grave together, to finally complete the circle that had been broken before either of us really understood what we'd lost. 3 weeks later, standing in a small cemetery in Massachusetts, I placed flowers on my biological mother's headstone while Emma told her we'd found each other. The inscription was simple: Margaret Williams, beloved mother. Beloved mother. Not beloved mother of Emma. Not beloved mother of Jake. Just beloved mother. Like she'd always held space for both of us, even when we couldn't hold space for each other. That evening, Emma and I had dinner with her family. Her kids, ages 8 and 10, were fascinated by their mysterious uncle who'd appeared out of nowhere. Her husband, Marcus, was warm and welcoming in that way people are when they understand the magnitude of what they're witnessing. Aunt Margaret used to tell us stories about Uncle Jake, Emma's daughter said over dessert. She said you were very smart and very kind, and that someday we'd get to meet you. Margaret had told her grandchildren about me, had kept my memory alive in their family the same way my adoptive parents had kept the idea of my birth mother alive in theirs. Both families carrying pieces of a puzzle they couldn't complete without each other. Now, 6 months later, Emma and I text almost daily. Her kids call me Uncle Jake. I've helped her husband with some financial planning. She's taught Sarah how to make Margaret's famous chocolate chip cookies. We're building something new, something that acknowledges the past without being defined by it. The Patterson family gatherings are different now. More honest, more complicated, but somehow more genuine. Uncle Richard is trying to be the father Emma deserves. 32 years late, but better than never. Aunt Carol and Emma have developed an unexpected friendship, bonded by their shared experience of loving complicated men who couldn't figure out how to tell the truth. My parents and I are still working through things. There's hurt there that won't heal overnight. Trust that needs to be rebuilt conversation by conversation. But there's also love and understanding, and a recognition that people sometimes make terrible decisions for reasons they think are right at the time. The hardest part hasn't been forgiving everyone else. It's been forgiving myself for all the years I spent feeling like I didn't belong, like something was wrong with me, like I was the problem in family dynamics I couldn't understand. Turns out I wasn't the problem. I was just the symptom of a much bigger issue no one wanted to address. But here's what I've learned about family secrets. They don't actually protect anyone. They just spread the damage around, make everyone complicit in maintaining a lie that serves no one. The truth, even when it's painful, even when it disrupts everything you thought you knew. The truth is lighter than secrets. It's cleaner. It makes room for real healing instead of just careful management. Emma sent me a photo yesterday. Her kids building a snowman in their backyard, laughing and covered in snow. The caption read, Uncle Jake, the kids want to know if you and Sarah are coming for Christmas. We're making Margaret's famous hot chocolate. I'm going. Of course I'm going. For the first time in my life, I know exactly where I belong, and it's not just with one family or the other. It's in the space we're creating together, built on truth instead of secrets, on choice instead of obligation. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you end up with. Sometimes the family you end up with isn't the one that raised you. Sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to have both. Have you ever discovered something that changed everything you thought you knew about your life? Share your story in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about families, secrets, and the complicated ways we love each other.